Gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Be Man podcast. I'm your host, Greg Denning. There is a storm coming. At least it seems that way, and we'll dive into that today. But there are some brilliant leaders and thinkers out there, lots of them, more than just one. So if it was one random dude like out in the woods, some hillbilly backwoods guy from the middle of nowhere in the Ozarks screaming and yelling that the sky is falling, be like, maybe. But when you have some absolutely brilliant, well-read, well-traveled people raising a warning voice that there are patterns that have been happening for hundreds of years, thousands of years, and those same patterns are happening now, and that we're going into a winter season in our society and economy, then we should probably listen. Now, we could disregard it. We could say, come on, man, we're moving past that. We've got all these technologies. We've advanced as a society and as a race on the planet, and things are way better. Like those things aren't going to happen anymore. And you can argue that and you think that, right? And it is possible, right? Things are going to be different. They definitely will be different because of all the advances, technology, and changes. But history repeats itself. There's a reason that phrase still exists and why we use it. But are we paying attention? Are we reading enough history to see that the patterns are coming and that there's always indicators before the patterns, right? There's these mile markers, and you could see it like going down the path. Oh, it hits this, hits that, and there's that result. Now it's going to look different every time, but it is going to come. And in many instances, there haven't been exceptions even to the rule in hundreds of years of recorded history. And so we can sit here and be like, we can hope, but hope isn't a strategy. And we can even believe and say, it's not going to happen, but history says otherwise. And so it's worth paying attention, gentlemen. And that's kind of what I want to talk about today, as I've been reading these books and listening to these podcasts. Now, of course, input determines output, right? If we go, you get in that world of things, it starts to come up and comes to the surface, and it's more, your mind's paying attention to it more, so you see more of it, and I get that. But it's also, I think, extremely foolish to just put your head in the sand and hope it doesn't happen. I remember being like that myself, wishing, hoping, oh man, I hope this doesn't happen. But I think we're better off to assume that it is going to happen. So let's just do that for fun, for thought's sake. Let's just go through and let's assume that what they're talking about is actually going to happen. And I think there's a measure of wisdom and safety in that, right? We've heard that phrase, the cliche phrase of better to be safe than sorry. And in this instance, yeah, that's going to be huge. You'd much, much, much rather be safe than sorry if what they're talking about at a global level plays out. So there are many instances of this and many voices. So we'll dive into this more, but books like The Fourth Turning, if you haven't read that yet, read it. Fantastic book written a couple of decades ago, but still so relevant and so real. And the things they predicted are now happening. Books that are just more recent, Ray Dalio's book, The Changing World Order, fantastic, but big macro level, global perspective about huge shifts in world powers. Excellent book. And then podcasts. So I just recently listened to a podcast by Michael Yon and Jordan Peterson. And I highly recommend that podcast. It's on Jordan Peterson's podcast. Fantastic conversation. And these men are well-read, well-traveled. They've been all over the world. Michael Yon's story is fantastic. I did not know about him and learned about his story. And he's been all over the world, and he's been deeply involved in these kind of scenarios, like when societies are in trouble and they're collapsing, when there's wars. And he says that three things go together all the time: is epidemics, famines, and war, right? And how they all play off each other. And when there's a famine, man, it leads to epidemics, and which that leads to wars, right? Those three just kind of go together in everything. And he sees that coming. And he says in there, and it's worth listening to, worth reading and considering. And again, today we all hope they're wrong. I hope I'm wrong. I hope they're wrong. I hope it doesn't happen. I hope we just go on and everything's fantastic. But what if it doesn't? And history says it won't. So wouldn't it be better? And again, none of this is fearful. None of this is like negative based, like, whoa, scary. We're trying to be extreme or fanatical or kind of freak people out. None of this is that. This whole conversation is like, hey, man, if winter's coming, let's say you live in the Northern Hemisphere. And so winter is in November, December, January, February. None of us would be concerned if in November the weather's getting colder, the leaves have all changed, are falling, and the neighbors are like, hey, man, we better start gathering some coal, some firewood. When we lived in Alaska, we spent a winter up in Alaska. We had to gather a lot of firewood and a lot of coal. And so we spent a lot of fall days chopping firewood and chopping, and gathering coal a lot. And I'm so glad we did. And nobody's freaking out. Nobody's, oh, you're so negative. You're so pessimistic. Gosh, why are you out, chopping firewood and gathering coal? You're such a negative Nancy. What's your problem? Just be more hopeful, right? Nobody's gonna think that because the seasons come and go. And so we're going into a social and economic winter. And things could get really bad. And in fact, the likelihood is, and again, I'm not trying to be fanatical, I'm not trying to be extreme here. If you look at the patterns of history, if you study and learn from historical cycles, there's winters, there's wars, there's famines, there's epidemics, pandemics. And so it's safer, and this is how we're going to roll today. Let's assume they're right. If they're right on their predictions, and we'll get into that a little bit more, what would you do? And so I wanted to record this today, just thinking through this. Like, okay, because I've been doing this with my family. Like, let's assume they're right. They could be wrong. Fantastic. That's great. We just keep rolling along, and that's awesome. But let's assume they are, just for a minute, just for fun. Let's think through this. Let's assume they're right in what they're saying. What would you do? And what would you do in a way that's, it's not totally disruptive, right? You don't have to become like a hardcore prepper. Although the preppers are going to be like, haha, we told you so, right? Those guys have been prepping for 5, 10, 15, 20 years. They're going to be like, yeah, you should have listened to me. And when it all, plays out, and it will, the people who are more prepared are going to have, on an average, a huge advantage over those who are not. And what concerns me the most is whenever there are situations like this, it's the poor and the ignorant who suffer the most. And man, they suffer so much. And it's not always their fault. Sometimes we want to be condemning, right? Like, well, they should have known better. They should have prepared. Well, maybe it's not their fault. Maybe they didn't get the education. Maybe they weren't raised in a way to be able to think like that. Or maybe there's other factors in play. So, we got to withhold judgment and condemnation there and help as much as we can. In fact, my message and desire is always to be so prepared and so resourceful that not only can I take care of myself and my family, I can have plenty of bandwidth and resources to help others, right? Help those who may not be able to help themselves or didn't know, right? So we've got to watch out for that, and that's coming. So one thing Michael said in that podcast recently, he thinks that it wouldn't be an exaggeration that 1 billion people will die by 2025. So that's 2.5 years, 2.5, 3 years. 1 billion people. That's huge. And from what he's saying, he's like, hey, I'm not a fanatical guy. I'm a pretty measured guy. People have to trust me that I'm, sharing the truth. I'm not overreacting or exaggerating. And so I don't know, maybe he's way off. I don't know. But just for this conversation, let's assume that many millions of people will starve. And in those in those situations, what happens is they don't actually starve to death. Some do, but then they get sick, right? If we don't have access to adequate food, nutrition, right? And then medical attention, which will happen as well when the state starts to fail and pieces of society start to collapse, or even just supply chain stuff. I think you're all aware that supply chain disruptions are happening all the time. This is weird stuff. Like, you can't, one of my clients is trying to buy a minivan. They aren't available. Other clients are trying to get a hold of concrete for construction. There's no concrete. Or you're trying to order these random parts and pieces. I got on to try to order something random, and it's like, nope, no availability. I can't get a camera right now. I'm trying to buy a camera. Can't get a camera. Like, what's going on? There's weird stuff going on, right? So we're all aware of that. And there's going to play out. So if you don't have adequate food and you don't have adequate medical care, a lot of people end up dying of illness and disease. And then, of course, many die in some kind of conflict or war. Some will be civil wars. That's been happening. Civil wars have been happening. Gosh, you could probably say always. Somewhere on the planet, there's some kind of civil conflict. And there's going to be more of that. And then nations attacking nations. There's going to be more of that, and more sophisticated weapons and technology. And so there's going to be cyber attacks. There's always been agendas and this manipulation of the media and these messages, right? That's always existed, and that's going to continue to exist. It's the propaganda. Ooh, so it reminds me, I was going to recommend some books that we read. Is one of the things we got to do is we've got to be reading. We've got to educate our minds, and we need to be reading books. Like, I'm gonna jot that down real quick here. We've got to be reading books about that specifically, something like 1984. And I just read one recently called Fahrenheit 451, right? And that's, I mean, books like that, you gotta, An Animal Farm, I'm gonna jot that down too. So I'm gonna give you a list of books today, gentlemen. Books are the best. Books are life-changing, and they're such a great resource. We'll dive into that in a minute, but you've got to be consistently reading and make sure that our minds are sharp and ready, and we're aware of what's going on. Awareness is our friend. So it's not, circling back to that, it's not pessimistic, it's not negative to be prepared. Right? It's always to be better to be prepared than scared. And awareness ahead of time gives you such an advantage. So it's not, if it's October, November, and you're like, hey, we should start, getting our winter clothes out and start checking the house, make sure the windows and doors are all sealed, and make sure we have plenty of a heat source to keep us warm, right? Let's make sure. And then you go the difference. And this is where I want to go today, is like, let's make sure all the survival stuff's taken care of. And let's go ahead and get out the skis and the snowboards and the sleds and the snowmobiles and the snowshoes. Like, let's buckle up. Let's have some fun. So while some people might be miserable and cold and lonely and scared and suffering, others will be out, like, literally having fun, enjoying a storm. And it might seem senseless, like, how could you be enjoying a storm? Have you ever been out and enjoyed a winter storm? Man, I know I have. I love winter storms, big old snowstorms. Actually quite fun to play in. And it's interesting that in the same instance, this storm that might be so devastating for some people could actually be a source of fun for others. And it just depends on where you're at and your level of preparation and readiness. So I do believe, not trying to be pessimistic or negative here, I do believe there is a storm coming. I do believe that things will get worse before they get better. It's just the cycles and patterns. It's happened before. It's very likely to happen again. It would be foolish and naive to think it won't. We may be off on timing. It might look very different, but let's assume that it's going to happen. And if it is going to happen, let's get prepared. So one of the things they're saying is there's going to be massive food shortages, a global famine that's just off the charts. I think the things that'll be coming, again, following patterns in history, these things, and this is the fourth turning, right? These kind of things happen approximately every 80 years. And it's so big and so catastrophic. It's the only thing that'll happen in your lifetime that's that big. So those of you listening to this will be the one time in our lifetime, unless things change, patterns of history change, whatever, anything can happen, right? There's no guarantees. But if it follows the pattern, then this is the timing, and something massive could come. And so a global famine, which of course brings massive shortages in all kinds of things. And if there's supply chain issues and there's political problems and separation, division among the people, and war and famine, then there's going to be pestilence or disease, pandemics, epidemics coming in, and then major strain on hospitals and medical supplies. But they're not able to get medical supplies because of shortages and supply chain issues, and then workers out for food or war or whatever. So there's, a lack of skilled people around. So it could spiral out of control. Again, we're not being fearful here. This isn't freak out factor. I don't want any of you to be scared. I want you to just like, okay, let's assume they're right. Let's assume those things are going to happen. Now, obviously they can happen. If we don't think they can happen, then we're foolish and naive. So let's assume we know they can happen. Let's assume they're going to. And so if you know the winter storm's coming, what are you going to do about it? And that's the fundamental question I want to ask today. Ask you personally, like, what are you and your family going to do about it? And it isn't a freak out factor, and it's not to scare you or your family or even to stop you from living. We're going to keep chasing our dreams. In fact, as we lean into courage, I've been thinking about courage a lot. As we lean into courage and live with more courage, courage is about two main things: facing your fears and your obstacles and chasing your dreams. So you face and chase, face and chase. So you face the obstacles, you face the fear, you face the reality checks, you face the possibility of these things actually happening in the next few years, or even they're suggesting it's going to happen this fall. So in as little as 3 or 4 months, it's going to begin. But still chasing your dreams, right? It takes courage to still chase dreams. And in what's coming, I wholeheartedly believe you're also going to see some of the greatest opportunities of your lifetime. So, and again, I always believe obstacles are opportunities, right? They're just dressed differently. So if you can learn to see obstacles as opportunities, man, you're going to see lots of them. But because things will get so shaken up, there are going to be massive opportunities in business and service and change and transformation and contribution, making a difference in the world, getting things changed to be way better. And after winter, spring comes along, and in spring we rebuild and build things better. So I'm super optimistic about the future, but in all likelihood, we're going to go through some challenging times. Okay. What are we going to do about it? What are you going to do about it? What do you want to do about it? Fundamentally, I think your greatest asset is your own resourcefulness, your own skills. It's you. You're your greatest asset, right? And the whole idea around the Be the Man movement and the masterclass, the tribe, even the logo I created, it all came down to this idea of being an asset as a man, being a seriously resourceful human being, and taking a holistic approach to preparation and readiness, and being holy as a whole, holy and fully developed as a human being. So it's covering, as I was sitting down, I'm like, okay, what are the major aspects of a man? What would keep us in readiness? What would fill us out? Because so many problems in life come from being underdeveloped in a certain area, right? If you're underdeveloped in your health, then obviously plays out, right? That's the easy one. If you're underdeveloped emotionally, if you're underdeveloped socially, if you're underdeveloped spiritually or financially, that's where you get into trouble. Not that anything's wrong with you or you're broken necessarily, but you're just underdeveloped. And so if you have an underdeveloped knowledge base or skill set, you suffer because of that. So the idea is to be whole. So that's why I created the triple triangle. I call it the triple trifecta. It's 3 main elements: fitness, family, and finances. And inside each of those, there's 3 more. So it's the triple trifecta. Under fitness, it's it's mind, body, and spirit, to be mentally, physically, and spiritually fit, you as a being. Under family, it's marriage and parenting and family legacy, having those all completely dialed in and ready. And then in finances, it's your income, of course, which is your greatest asset, how you spend your money, your expenses, and your investments. And so as a whole, you're becoming an asset. You're becoming a whole man who's ready. And I came across this amazing Latin phrase. It's in omnia paratus, right? In omnia paratus. It means in all things prepared. Or another way to say that is ready for anything. And I love that idea. And for me, that is a mark of manliness, being ready and prepared for anything and everything. Now, obviously, you can't prepare for everything. There's so many contingencies that you can't know are coming, but you got to prepare for those too, right? You prepare for everything you could possibly think of, and then prepare for the things you can't think of, the things you don't know are coming. And it's not perfect, and there's no guarantees. But what you're doing is increasing your probabilities. That's what I want to drive home today. Fellas, we can dramatically increase our probabilities of success. And if we do it well, we can even have time to go skiing and snowboarding and jump on the snowmobiles and the sleds. And our kids, our children who are going to also live through this, they might, instead of suffering, have some fun too. And we can contribute and help. There's going to be endless opportunities to help and serve and make a difference. So for this, I'm going to keep reemphasizing this. For this conversation, let's assume they're right. Let's walk through what you want to do, what would be wise to do. And let's remember that this isn't negative. This isn't pessimistic. It's not fear-based. No fear in it. It's like, okay, well, that could happen. Let's assume that it does. What would I want to do to be better prepared? And so we're going to walk through some things I've been thinking about. Love to hear your comments. You guys can reach out to me on social, on Instagram or Facebook. It's Greg Denning. Instagram, it's greg.denning specifically. My website is gregdenning.com, or you can go to bethemanmasterclass.com. Our family site is extraordinaryfamilylife.com. So you can follow us. Our family on social is World School Family. So again, connect with us. Shoot me an email, shoot me a message, share your insights, share the things you've been doing or you think about doing. Like let's have a kind of an engagement here. I know it's a little one-sided as a podcast, but I want you to think about this and write about it. Talk to your spouse, family about it. I've been talking to my spouse and our kids about it. We've been including the older kids in it, even a little bit of the younger kids. Just been talking through it, not in a fearful way, not scaring anybody. I'm just saying, hey, if we're going to face a challenge, if there was an obstacle coming and you knew it was coming, wouldn't you rather know? And if you know it's coming, what would you do to prepare, right? It's just wise and helpful. So number one is health and fitness. Man, your body is your vehicle for everything you're going to experience, good, bad, or ugly, whatever. Your body is your vehicle. So make sure you're in fantastic health and fitness. There very likely will be some serious demands put on you physically, or even mentally or socially or spiritually or whatever, but it affects your body. And it takes its toll. And so if you're in fantastic shape and health, then the body can sustain that. But even a mental, social, spiritual, financial hit can show up in the body. And if you have poor health, it's far more likely to take a worse toll and turn to illness and disease quickly and cause some problems. So fellas, get into the best shape of your life, the best health of your life, and stay there for the rest of your life. That's my standard. That's how I live. All right. I'm going to stay in fantastic shape. Just had an awesome workout with my son and my daughter today. It was really great. Eat good foods. Make sure you've got all kinds of good natural vitamins or supplements or whatever it is. Like there's some disagreement about that in the industry or whatever, and there's lots around that, but just get yourself into a good, healthy position. Make sure your body is in fantastic conditions, as best as it can be. So make that a huge priority and do it with urgency, and then keep it there. So make it sustainable. Next is resilience and fortitude. This one's important and it's challenging, but it's worth assessing yourself and asking, like, how well do you do in resilience and fortitude, persistence, endurance? And maybe you haven't been tried or tested for a while. Maybe your life's, most of us, we live pretty comfortable lives, right? Even when it's like, it's been kind of tough lately. Like, it's relative, right? How well do you do in resilience? And what can you do to strengthen it? There's little things you can start doing. You can even sign up for resistance endurance events and races and competitions. Now, what's interesting about that is like you're actually signing up for a sport, but you start cultivating that resilience muscle, so to speak, and the capacity to endure things and hopefully endure them well, mentally and physically, emotionally, spiritually, socially. You build up your tolerance for things that you need to tolerate. And I think that's worth practicing. And you can do it a little bit on a daily basis with what I call micro dosing. You can do little hard things every day, like maybe a cold shower or something like that, or following through and keeping your word, saying you're going to do something and actually doing it. And then on a regular basis, maybe it's weekly or monthly or quarterly, you sign up for hard events or do hard things, really push your limits to cultivate that resilience and help your family do the same thing, and your teammates, the people around you, like cultivate this in a positive way. So we build up that resistance. Some people will just collapse because they cannot handle it mentally or emotionally or socially. And some of the books I'm going to recommend here in a minute illustrated that so fantastically when things really got bad, when it hit hard, they just collapsed. They just gave up and died because they couldn't handle the resilience, the disappointment, right? Everything they'd counted on, banked on, they'd misaligned all of their hopes and dreams and happiness and meaning in life. They'd put it in something else. And when that's gone, they lost all their identity and all their raison d'être, right? Their reason of being. They're in Japanese ikigai. It's like what's your reason for being? What's your why? What's your purpose? Who are you without all the stuff and things? If your whole identity is wrapped up in stuff and things, and the stuff and things get lost or burned or destroyed or washed away in a flood or stolen, what do you have left? And so it's working through those things as well, and getting a lot of clarity about who you are and how you're going to do life. So there's some big stuff there. So let's actually dive into books. I love books. Books totally transformed my life. When I ended up out on my own at 16. We were really poor growing up and had some challenges. After I went through those challenges, I traveled around the world and met others who really had hard lives. And then I realized mine wasn't that hard. But in the moment, I thought it was pretty challenging. And so out on my own at 16 in rough neighborhoods and alone and hungry, often didn't have enough to eat, and often didn't have really adequate places to stay. But still, overall, I mean, just being in the United States, being homeless in the United States is often far better than some of the places I've been, and actually far worse than other places I've been. But it's relative in that way. And luckily, early on in those hard times, I started reading books. And fortunately, I ended up with some books in my hands about World War II. And game changer, total perspective changer on the difficulties and the situations I was facing. I'm like, okay, it's bad right now. I feel like it's pretty bad, but it's not that. I'm not in a concentration camp, and nobody's trying to like kill me every day, and no one's torturing me. Like, oh, okay, I'm good. And then they became my mentors. And coach, so it gave me a perspective, and the authors of the books changed the way I saw things. And so then I started reading more and more. I'm like, well, wait a minute, that was helpful. That changed my life. Like, I wonder if there are other books like that. And so I've since read well over 1,000 books. I still average a book a week, and I'm reading voraciously, learning all the time, expanding myself in all kinds of genres, and getting into ideas that expand your understanding of humanity and life and history and teach you how to think. So let's dive into some of those. Let's do the last fourth turning was World War II, and there was so much in there, right? So much going on in Japan and in Europe, and there's so much. It's so complex. You could spend your whole life just studying World War II. some of the ones that were very insightful and helpful for me were a book called And There Was Light by Jacques Lucero. A fantastic book. Love that book. As a blind teenage boy, he ended up leading the underground resistance against the Nazis. So no excuses. That book is awesome. Read that. What a great man. Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. Unbroken by Louis Zamperini. The Hiding Place by Corrie ten Boom. Beneath a Scarlet Sky, that was based out of Italy, I think in Milan. Phenomenal book. I love that one. The Choice by Edith Edgar. She was a teenage girl and got sent into, she was in Hungary and got sent into Auschwitz and survived. What's interesting about all these books, they all mention how when it was first happening, the people just didn't believe it. They were in denial. They're like, nah, it's not going to happen. It can't get that bad. No. And they're like, okay, it's a little bad, but it's not going to be that bad. And when it's happening, people discredit it. And so let's learn from that lesson. Like if people are raising a warning voice right now, and to be clear, there were a lot of people raising a warning voice about the Nazis. You know, it's another great one is Bonhofer by Eric Metaxas. It's a biography on Dietrich Bonhofer. I love that book. One of my favorite books. Same thing there. His family was raising a warning voice like, hey, this is not good. This is going to lead to horrible things. Like people should get out. This is going to stop, whatever. And they were like, whatever, you're being fanatical. It's not going to happen. And so before it all hits the fan and things get really bad, we're all going to be tempted to say, come on, it's not going to happen. All these people are warning. They're being a little bit fanatical or extreme. There's a warning in history. People are just not likely to believe it until it finally happens. And then they're like, ugh, man, we should have listened. Right. So good insight there. Another one is, so A Choice, I told you, by Edith Edgar. We're actually going to read that as a group. So I lead a class for youth. As long as I have teenagers and young adults, I'm going to keep doing a class for teenagers and young adults. It's awesome. Bringing about 50 or 60 great youth in there. And we read and discuss great books. And we're reading The Choice and the Gift starting here in a couple weeks. So if you've got youth, you may want to consider getting them in there. It's awesome. Awesome class. Night by Ellie Weiss. I think Ellie's how you say it, Weiss. And then The Gulag Archipelago by Schultz and Eaton. That one is big and long and worth reading. And it's just astounding to me that my mom, who's still alive, was a little girl when that was happening in Russia, the torture camps. It happened in her lifetime. And yet she's still alive, right? When she was a little girl, that was happening. And yet we still have the naivete and the audacity thing. Oh, that won't happen anymore. That doesn't happen. People aren't that bad. Like this kind of stuff. No, it doesn't happen. I mean, it happens. There's a small percentage of the population on the earth that is filled with so much malice and hatred and evil. It's just a small percentage, but man, they can do so much damage and so many things. So we need to be aware of those things. So anyways, those are some great books to read what happened. What were the signs and symptoms? What were the common denominators? Because it's all going to look different, right? Every time it happens, it's going to look very different. It'll look different this time, but there are always common denominators. There's always signs and symptoms. There's always things we can look for, and then how they responded to it. So our obstacles are going to look very different than their obstacles, but how they respond can still be very extremely valuable for us. So read those great books. Other ones about that I mentioned before about, understanding the propaganda of what's happening, how they build it up, the messaging they use. And this is strategic. And I think, again, you might think, oh, you're such a conspiracy theorist. Oh, right. We're just talking about the past. In the past, they use propaganda. There is a museum in Berlin about the, I think it was the SS. Man, and it's right on the wall. So the wall's right there, the Berlin Wall, and then the museum's right there. It's phenomenal. But it talks about the propaganda. And it's always happening, and it's still happening today. It's happening all over the place. They will use mass media for propaganda to spread this message, this idea, this false idea to the masses. And we got to be able to see through that. It's happened again and again and again in history. So we can't deny or ignore that it's going to happen again, right? So books like 1984, Fahrenheit 451, Animal Farm, books like that. Read from the great classics about thinking, about government, about survival stories. Read The Law by Bastiat. Read Aristotle. Read from the great classics. So we learn how to think. We learn about government. We learn about law. We learn about when it succeeds and when it fails. Like, understand that stuff. Some of the best investments you ever make is in great books. Always invest. I spent a lot of money last week on books. In fact, we spend a lot of money every week on books. We keep doing that. Get some really great self-defense books. Learning how to protect yourself and your family. Because that's when you think through it, like when everything goes crazy, what's likely to happen? And just play it out in your mind, not in a scary way, not a fearful way. Just think like, oh, rationally think, what will humans do? Well, they're going to get real desperate. Well, what do desperate people do? They do desperate things. They turn to violence. They turn to rioting. They turn to mobs. They turn to stealing. They just give up rational thought. And you and I might do the same. Push to a certain point, you might steal to feed your kids or do something that you might snap, right? So again, think through all this stuff, like what are the things that happen? You're going to need to be able to protect yourself. And some people just turn to absolute violence. In fact, the reality is when societies fall apart, when the state fails, that's when predators come out and they harvest like crazy, meaning it's the harvest time for predators. They're trying to take advantage of people. So evil people will rise up and take advantage, even a small way or a huge way. There's a void in leadership, and malicious people will try to rise and fill that, but hopefully really good men do as well. And I hope you're one of them. I hope you rise to lead, whether in your community or at a bigger level, or even it's just in your family. You've got to lead through this. And I have to it begs the question, how are you going to lead and model and be in times of trouble and trial and challenge? What's going to be your reputation that you build, your legacy? When we face hard times, what kind of man are you going to be? Man, that matters so much. So grab some defense books, learn. Well, we'll get to that in a minute. A couple of books I highly recommend is one's called The Ultimate Emergency Medicine Guide. Fantastic book, husband and wife authors about emergency medicine and just understanding if you know, in a situation where, okay, there's an acute situation, there's trouble, and this will serve you. Again, all of this, we're just assuming, we're going to assume it happens just for wisdom's sake, right? Just better be safe than sorry. Again, expecting the best, but preparing for the worst. That's how I just live. Prepare for the worst, expect the best. Prepare for the worst, expect the best. And then go along living life, live the best. And if something happens, fantastic, you're prepared. You can help out. Even if it just be, you know, out on vacation sometime and you see an accident, man, you can jump in and help and do something about it. But what I love about that book specifically is like, okay, here's, you know, if you're in a wilderness situation or you're out traveling and there aren't resources nearby, well, basically the whole idea is, what do you do when no one's coming? There's something like, you can do something and try to sustain it until help gets there. But what do you do if help isn't coming? If no one's coming to rescue you, what do you do? That's the kind of preparation I want to develop in myself and my family. And so, and he addresses that. I love that one. Just the way he explains all that's phenomenal. I picked up another book. It's called PHTLS, Pre-Hospital Trauma Life Support. It's the military 9th edition. This baby is just like, is the Bible of pre-hospital life support, right? Just a phenomenal resource for, and it's big. It's just like this huge textbook you'd be reading if you like were pursuing medical care. I mean, it's lots and lots of words, and it's heavy, but I love this stuff. This is the kind of stuff I geek out about and read a little bit every day and just educate your mind on all these things. So again, you know, you just take whatever approach you want to, whatever you need to prepare, but I want to take this holistic approach where I want to be able to understand the big classic thinkers and what's happening on a global level in the propaganda and government and law, and understand all of that. I want to understand what has happened in the past and what's happening now, how to help people, how to communicate and articulate things, how to lead, how to be prepared at every kind of level, right? Even in advanced medicine, and have this as a resource. I have all these other great books and stories. I mean, on and on and on, right? In self-defense. So in addition to the books, I want to invite you to consider signing up for classes and courses. I do this all the time. I set aside a part of our budget and have for years and years and years. In fact, our whole marriage, we've done this. We have a budget for books. We buy tons of books all the time. And we have a budget for classes and courses and learning and advanced learning. And so I'm constantly going to find whatever course that would help me be a better man in business and marriage and life and parenting and self-defense. So emergency medicine, I recommend an organization called Independence Training based out of Arizona. They're fantastic. You could take advanced wilderness life support. You could even go get an EMT or paramedic if you wanted to do that. You could at least at a minimum take a wilderness first responder course. Those are fantastic. At a bare minimum, all of your people in your family and you should have like CPR courses and at least some quick trauma training, like how to put on a tourniquet and how to stuff a wound and how to bandage up a wound. I just learn that stuff, practice it. I'm going to teach my kids how to do sutures, how to do IVs. I mean, I'm going to go, I'm going all the way, right? I just want to be really, really prepared so that if there ever a situation where those things collapse, like, and there have been so many instances, you just look across history, even recent history, even things like Hurricane Katrina and other natural disasters, when that hits, man, hospitals gone or overwhelmed, ambulances, EMS services gone, police gone, like they're all surviving or things are wiped out. And so no one's coming, man, or not coming for a long time, or you have to get out. So I want to be prepared. I want to assume on the safe side that things like that, because things like that have happened in the past, there's a probability that they'll happen again. And if they do, I hope they never do. I hope you're never in that situation. I hope I'm never in that situation. I hope it doesn't happen. I hope we're wrong. But if it ever does, I want to be prepared. I want to be resourceful. I want to know what to do and how to do it. So sign up for self-defense classes. Take Krav Maga or Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or whatever. And just get some training. Take weapons training. If you're going to have weapons, and I think everyone should have some weapons to protect themselves. Again, about a small percentage, maybe 3% of society is psychopathic. There's crazy. It's very small. Most people are great. Most people are friendly. Most people will help you, but there's a small percentage of people that will totally take advantage of you and harm you. And we can get into statistics. Just in Atlanta, the city of Atlanta alone, last year, there was over 21,000 violent crimes that were reported. There were a lot of others that weren't reported. 21,000 violent crimes in one city. About every 68 seconds, a woman is raped in the United States alone. And there are millions of sex slaves in human trafficking right now. It's a real deal. And the US is responsible for a third of that. That's just astounding, right? So just because we live good, comfortable lives in a nice neighborhood, like don't think that horrible things aren't happening around you all the time. And we need to be prepared, right? Not naive and prepared, not scared either. Don't be scared, be prepared. And then food and medicine, man, make sure you got a food supply. If there really is going to be a shortage of food, get some food storage, store up some food, learn how to prepare food, maybe even hunt, whatever. Medicines, right? There's going to be a shortage of medicines or medical supply. Tools. Get tools that would be useful. If things start collapsing and going down, what tools would be helpful? Make sure you have a bug out plan. If you've got to get away from wherever it is for whatever reason, maybe it's just natural disaster. Maybe it's a fire, right? This horrible fires before, what was it last year? Just went through Colorado and California. Wow, man. And Oregon and Washington, right? If you got to get out, have a plan. That's not fearful. It's not pessimistic. It's not negative. It's like it happens all the time. So why wouldn't it happen to you? Right now, and I get it. I get the whole metaphysical thing, and like it's not going to happen to me, and we're going to be led and guided. Fantastic, great. I believe that too. But it's wise to be prepared. It's wise in some instances to, in a healthy way, assume that those things could happen, and that these big thinkers and leaders are right. The warning voices they're raising, let's assume they're right, because we'll be in a way better situation. So have a bug out plan, have bags. You know, people talking about 72-hour kits. Like when we were first married, I put one together. It was about $1,200 to put it together in a big backpack. And I'm like, okay, if we needed to, we could live off this thing for weeks and weeks, if not months. Now with a big family, 7 kids and all kinds of stuff, like it would take, there's no bag for getting away. Like we'd have to, I know what to get. There'd be a bunch of stuff and we can grab it and it'd be fill up the back of a pickup truck, but we could roll out if we needed to. Have a plan. If there's chaos or mayhem or whatever, you need to leave, you're on the move, have a plan. Just think through it. And again, not fearful, you're not scaring anybody. You're just talking through like, oh, that's interesting. Read a book, watch a movie, do that. Like this is a great way to introduce it with kids is read a book or watch a movie, tell a story. And you can adjust it for littler kids, whatever, and say, oh man, what would you guys do in that situation? Well, this happened in this country and this happened in the past. And this has happened right here. Like, what would you do? And tell stories about your ancestors. Like, what would you do in that situation? What do you think? And tell about current events. And again, adjust it to their age level and preparation, but don't keep them naive and don't make them sheltered. Naivete is dangerous. It's the naive and the ignorant who are the most vulnerable. So don't be that and don't allow it in your own family. But so have a bug out plan and then have a stay in plan. Like if you're staying put, have a plan. Have a plan. Like if things get crazy or chaotic, like what are we going to do? And so the invitation here, again, I'm not trying to scare anybody. I'm not trying to be negative or fearful or pessimistic or whatever. Like, let's just be prepared. Let's be assets. Be an asset, gentlemen. Be ready. In omnia paratus, right? Ready for anything. And like, again, the whole idea of this logo for the Be the Man Masterclass and Tribe, and I wear it. I have it as a symbol and a reminder to be as a holistic optimization, a whole man ready for whatever's coming. And I'm going to prepare myself and I'm going to think through everything I possibly can. I'm going to study, I'm going to learn, I'm going to practice, I'm going to exercise, I'm going to be in phenomenal health, I'm going to great relationships, I'm going to prepare my wife and my children, I'm going to really lead out and be ready for whatever comes. And if it doesn't come, great, fantastic, all the better. And I'm still a resource. I'm an asset for humanity. I can help out. I can make a difference. I can do something good in the world. And if it never happens, great. I was prepared. I was competent and confident that I could do something. So the worst thing we could do is nothing, right? The best way to just get totally worked over in any kind of terrible situation is to do nothing and to be completely unprepared. So don't just do nothing. Do something, pick something. So go through, as we've been talking through this, just sit down, think about it, write about it. Like, what should we do? Do we need some food supplies? Do we need some medical supplies? What skills do we need? What knowledge do we need? What resources do we need to have available? What plans? What community, right? Maybe one of the best things you're going to do is make sure you have a great community. Make sure you got great friends and great contacts. You got a great network. You work together with others. Anyways, just go through. And I would say maybe one way to approach this is make a list of all the things you want to or need to cultivate or work on or develop to make this, get yourself in a better situation, and then prioritize it and start working on it as quickly as you can. I would say act with a sense of urgency. If we assume they're right, that it's happening this fall, it's going to begin, then we have a sense of urgency, a really healthy sense of urgency to get moving. Now, some areas of the world will be affected more immediately, and it may be a lag time until it gets to other areas. So in your area, maybe, at the beginning or at the end, I don't know, or maybe never gets affected. Maybe some areas of the world I think won't be affected by it. They'll get up and do what they keep doing and just keep plugging along. And some pieces and parts of the world will stay independent of it. Fantastic. That's great. Maybe you're in one of those places, but maybe not. And if you are in one of those places, at least the way I see things, you and I, we have a moral responsibility and obligation to help out, right? To help people who are in the hardest times. So do whatever you got to do to get yourself prepared as an individual, get your family prepared. And then if you have the resources and the ability to get prepared even beyond that, so you can be a huge asset and resource for humanity. Love you guys. Thanks for listening. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast if you haven't done that yet. Share this episode with friends or family or colleagues that need to hear this. You can take a screenshot of it and share it on social media. You can grab it on all your favorite platforms there. and share this. And if you like this, if you like the show, you can go leave a rating up to 5 stars and share us, help get this in front of more people. Let's share this message. Let's help people. And I know it can seem, extremist or conspiracy theorist or whatever, but it's just a real simple approach to history and repeating patterns and indications that are clearly happening right now in our society and in the world. Like there's no denying that that's happening. And if it's anything, if history says otherwise, then we're on a path for some storms. So let's prepare and get so prepared, in fact, that we could even get through it with some smiles and some fun and some amazing opportunities. You might be able to snowboard and ski your way through this winter and take advantage of massive opportunities for investing, for business, for making a difference, for making real positive change in the world. But it's all going to be dependent on our awareness and our preparation. So let's be prepared. Thanks, gentlemen. Thanks for listening. Thanks for being here. Be the man.